Welcome to Hoops Royalty. I'm King Jimison, alongside, as always, my man in Cleveland, Karna Venkatraj. And this here is a podcast about pain, a podcast about suffering, a podcast about surviving the darkest of times. Because this is a podcast about being a Memphis Grizzlies fan in 2023-2024, as the Grizzlies have just fallen to 0-4 on the heels of a really tough loss to the Mavericks, a game that looked like the Grizzlies might have a chance to pull ostensibly an upset, and then it all comes crashing down in the second half, and that's pretty much been the epitome of the entire season. Everything has come crashing down. The Grizzlies are at the bottom of the NBA standings. The Grizzlies are as far from NBA contention as they have been since probably John Morant's first season. We'll have more hope for that over the course of this episode, but Karna, how are you feeling? We'll talk basketball in a second, but just how are you feeling about being a Memphis Grizzlies fan right now?
Bad. I'm feeling bad. We can keep going. I feel bad.
Yeah. No more succinct way to put it than that. Well, with that in mind, I guess I will get us right to my royal decree, which you can guess it's not going to be a very fun one today, but let's hit it anyway. My royal decree is the Memphis Grizzlies are, shocker, not a good basketball team. But here is the shocker. They don't have an identity right now. This is a team that, for the entirety of the Taylor Jenkins and John Morant era, has played a certain style of basketball. A style of basketball that at the very least leads to a lot of regular season wins, even with people in and out of the lineup. And that style is you force a lot of turnovers, get out in the fast break, and you rebound the heck out of the basketball. Particularly offensively, you create a lot of extra possessions. Basically, the Grizzlies always just won the possessions game. And that extra effort, that ability to create havoc defensively, the size that they could bring on the glass, those were like a regular season cheat code. And now all of those things are gone. The Grizzlies are a subpar rebounding team. We knew that was the case the second Steven Adams went out of the lineup. We'll get to the signing of Bismack Biyombo in a little bit. That might help a teeny bit, but it's not going to solve the Grizzlies' rebounding issues. And, you know, one of the few things they are still good at relative to the rest of the NBA, one of the few things they're near the top of the NBA standings is enforcing turnovers, but they're not turning those turnovers into points. Their fast break scoring has not been something that can carry the offense. And oh boy, we already knew the half court scoring wasn't going to carry the offense. So this is a team that does not have an identity. And until they establish one, the losses are going to continue to pile up.
Yeah, and I stamp your royal decree. We don't have an identity. There's a bunch of solo ball being played. Isolation Marcus Smart. Like, he was good in this game. Like, he had some good moments, I guess, but, like, he's still really inefficient with the basketball when he's trying to create for himself. He's just not that guy. I don't know who told him he was that guy. Sorry, I'm getting angry. I don't know who told him he was that guy, or, like, why he thinks he could just jack up three-pointers in front of two other Mavs defenders, but he's never been that type of shooter. I don't know what's gotten into him to say that he's somehow the star offensive player of this team. But tonight he stepped out of his role. It wasn't good. I'm not just going to pick on Marcus Smart, but I think he's emblematic of a larger problem where guys don't look in sync in one unified identity on offense, and that kind of gets me to my royal decree. Can we stop jacking up three-pointers just, like, indiscriminately?
We said this the whole time, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like,
sure.
This has happened in game one. We were like, okay, they're trying something new. Fine. Like, we don't really have the personnel to be doing this. Xavier Tillman's taking multiple three-point shots a game. It looks better from Jaren. I'll give you that. It looks better from Jaren than game one. He didn't go 0 for 5, which is awesome. But it's an all-around issue where you have guys jacking up three-pointers indiscriminately, and it is benefiting some guys from a total point perspective, but overall our offense looks out of sync because now our identity offensively in the half court is finding a three-point shot that may or may not be a good shot from a shot selection perspective. And I think that's affecting another thing is currently the Grizzlies rank 26th in turnovers, 22nd in 3-point efficient shooting, and 21st in efficient field goal percentage or effective field
By
goal
the way,
percentage.
there are only 30 teams, so these rankings in the 20s, not good.
Horrible, just
Not
horrible.
good.
Like they're horrible, especially for the amount of talent that we had on our team. And advanced stats aside, the eye test is telling you that our 3-point shot selection is bad. I don't know if it's Patrick St. Andrews. I don't know if it's Taylor Jenkins. I understand the analytical argument behind shooting more 3-pointers. I get that you guys want to somehow be the Warriors. You do not have Steph and Clay. You played your personnel before you played to an analytical research paper. And I think that's something that the Grizzlies need to figure out. I don't mind running an analytical strategy. I love analytics. I work for a baseball team. I love analytics. It does not work if you don't have the right personnel. I don't care what calculator or Excel spreadsheet or more likely like Python model tells you that you should shoot more 3-pointers if you don't have guys that can hit 3-point shots or guys that can make long rebounds. That's my whole diatribe. On my roll decree, stop jacking up 3-pointers. I don't mind shooting more 3-pointers. Just make sure they're open looks.
Well, here's the scary thing, Karna. They've actually shot the ball from 3 pretty well in the last 2 losses.
It's true.
Tonight against the Mavericks, they hit 14 threes, hitting 38%. On Saturday against the Wizards, the Washington Wizards, the most surefire lottery team in the NBA, they hit 19 threes, shot 40%, lost. There is something structurally wrong with this basketball team, and obviously, Ja Morant being out is a huge part of that. Obviously, he's their offensive catalyst. And an underrated part of the offseason is in losing Tyus Jones, you lost that reliable secondary creator. But the thing is, Tyus Jones' replacement, Marcus Smart, is playing pretty well. I know you're on him, and I can't disagree with your point that he is stepping out of his role, but the man is playing pretty well. He's averaging 17 points per game for the Grizzlies, shooting over 50%, around 40% 3-point shooting after tonight's performance. He is having about as good of an offensive showing as we could reasonably expect as Grizzlies fans. The 3-point shooting in the past 2 games is where you could reasonably project it to be, frankly, as an optimistic projection, and yet they're still losing because they don't have the identity to create points with ease. They don't have anything that they can go to say, okay, this is how we win, this is how we score.
But and this is from an advanced stat perspective. It seems like the actual effective 3-point shooting that they're able to produce, meaning the shot selection is what we're talking about, is poor. So even if they're hitting shots, right, the shot selection that they're taking is poor. And then in the last part of this game, in the Mavs game, we saw the Grizzlies go cold. So even if the effective 3-point percent or the actual 3-point percent shooting is pretty high throughout the whole game, it doesn't matter if you front load those threes and you're still behind, whether it's Luka dominating the game or Jokic dominating the game. It needs to be consistent. And that's something we're going to get to is consistency has been a huge issue throughout games. One guy will get hot, whether it's Marcus Smart, and then we'll have a terrible possession for Marcus Smart. It's that consistency in scoring that the team is missing. I will give us this. I'll make one caveat. We ran into a couple of buzzsaws. Like the Wizards performing that way again seems a little bit like we ran into a buzzsaw.
Fair.
In the Wizards game where like it was guys jacking up 3-pointers, Kuzma like jumping out of the gym. Like there was a lot of things in that game defensively that were like breakdowns that you don't usually see with the Grizzlies that aren't concerning, but there's a whole lot that is concerning. And I think we'll get to that in our News of the Realm.
Yeah, let's get there right now. News of the Realm, and for that we need those trumpets. Man, those trumpets are way happier than the tenor of this podcast otherwise right now, but those trumpets means it's time for News of the Realm, where we give you the biggest news on the Memphis Grizzlies and NBA world. Karna, we already went over the news. The Grizzlies are 0-4. They've lost 3 times since we last podcasted. We haven't touched on the first of those 3 losses, which was last Friday against Denver. 4-point loss that was competitive till the final minute. A blown call where Aaron Gordon very clearly stepped out of bounds, took away an opportunity for the Grizzlies to possibly come down and take the lead. But that's not what cost them the game. What cost them the game is that the Grizzlies were throwing together the most hodgepodge of offenses I've ever seen. They benefited from, 9 Jokic turnovers, and they played their butts off in terms of effort. They absolutely balled out from a hustle standpoint, did those traditional Grizzlies grit and grind mentality things that I said that they're not doing for the rest of the season, and they still lost. That was a loss on talent alone, okay? And you also had Desmond Bane having a really off night from 3. Then, second night of a back-to-back, you head to Washington. This is not the time of year where you want to play a bad team because they still have their team intact. They're still motivated, thinking they have something to play for. And sure enough, you got a really solid performance from the Wizards, and the Grizzlies were absolutely horrible at generating points inside the arc. Shot the ball well from 3, still had a subpar offensive performance. And then, of course, we've talked about the Mavericks loss tonight, in which, here's the real number for you, and this is what I want you to react to, Karna. In tonight's game, Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane combined for 83 points. 30 each from Bane and Jackson. Grizzlies still lose. What does that tell you about where this team is at right now?
Dude, I don't. Maybe I don't know ball because my preconceived notion. Well, okay. What it tells me is that the bench had a really bad game, right? Like,
and the bench is just bad, and it's just a bad. That's bench. A fact. Yeah. And there was a hope that if Santi Aldama and Luke Kennard were healthy, and hopefully they will be by Wednesday, that Luke scoring, Santi's creativity could carry the bench. Without those 2 guys, I mean, it is a mess.
We thought LaRavia would take a step. Dude looked terrible tonight defensively. Derrick Rose, my lord. Derrick Rose was atrocious tonight. I think
he's been sneaky atrocious like the whole season. He had some good moments against the Nuggets. Great second half there, but if you took that half out, there's no way this guy should be trotting out on a basketball floor in the year 2023.
He's just been so, my lord. I just want to get it right, but he had 1 point for most of the game. Sorry, he had 1.1 rebound, minus 18, plus minus. The guy's just been bad. I mean, Derrick Rose has been bad. Jake LaRavia's been bad. David Roddy's been surprisingly good, I think, in some moments. Even though 9 points, he's developed some offensive game. He's really putting a lot of effort in. Zaire Williams is not a bench player right now, but has been good. Will be a bench player soon. I mean, the big takeaway here is that the bench has been subpar. It's been really bad. Injuries has contributed to that, but this see what we have approach that I've been talking about for like 4 or 5 podcasts straight has been concerning, right? And that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like giving Jake LaRavia extended minutes past like 5 in what he's shown us, and Derrick Rose the same way. We're seeing what we have, and it's not amounting to much, which is concerning. My first takeaway from the first 4 games, though, bench has been really, really bad. Luke Kennard was also really, really bad in that first game. Hopefully he comes back.
Yeah.
I don't expect him to continue to be bad, but hopefully he comes back, gets his stuff together, and the bench scoring improves. Because right now, without Jaren, Dez, and Marcus on the floor, we look even worse than they do when they're on the floor. And when they're on the floor, granted, we look pretty good. But when they're off the floor, it's just... I don't even know what to say. It's just really bad. It looks disjointed. There's no flow. Derrick Rose is not the catalyst that we thought he would be from a point guard perspective. It looks disjointed, out of sync, and not good enough to play on the NBA floor, especially with like any team past the bottom 10 on this in the league.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning. I mean, the Grizzlies have been at the butt end of some really good performances, including tonight. Luka had a 35-point triple-double with efficiency, but the thing is, in the Mavericks-Grizzlies series, Luka when he's been on the floor, has dominated it, has won 9 of his last 10 against the Grizzlies. He's missed a lot of time, and so that means that the series in that span doesn't look as lopsided, but Luka is a Grizz killer, plain and simple. The thing was, though, usually Luka's supporting cast was not the same as the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies were rolling 10 deep, bringing people off the bench that would certainly start for past versions of the Mavericks. And tonight, the Mavericks bench crushed the Grizzlies. Seth Curry plus 14 off the bench. Dwight Powell plus 10. Kleba plus 7. Hardaway plus 6. Exum plus 7. Pretty much everybody who played significant minutes off the bench were just playing, producing.
Exum was playing overseas.
I know.
Yeah, sure, bro.
Like,
what the?
and,
Come on,
but
man.
That's what happens when you get to go up against Jake LaRavia and Derrick Rose and Kenny Loft. I mean, Kenny didn't play, but
yeah,
that's what happens when you're going up against Derrick Rose and Jake LaRavia as a bench NBA, not backcourt, but two of the guys on the bench line up at the same time.
One takeaway here is that LaRavia might be the odd man out. I think.
I don't think he should be playing when you're fully healthy.
He's not going to play when we're fully healthy. Absolutely.
No. Even that's even just saying Santi and Luke. I think LaRavia his minutes are going to dip. But my takeaway would be, besides the Grizzlies needing to establish an identity, my other takeaway is this is a team of a bunch of not role players, but non-creators. This is a team filled with guys who can be stars within their role. And in Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr.'s case, they can just be flat out stars. But they're not initiators. They're not creators. They're not complete offensive hubs. They were both extremely efficient tonight. Desmond Bane scored 30 points going 12 of 17 from the field. Jaren Jackson Jr. scored 30 points going 10 of 20 from the field. You can't ask for much more from an efficiency perspective. But if you just watch the difference between the Mavericks offense and the Grizzlies offense, one is being run by a world-class offensive savant who is just picking apart the defense in whatever way he wants, and it's not always making plays for himself. A lot of the time it was drawing a double and making plays for others. And the Grizzlies don't have that. This is where they miss John Morant, and it's where they miss Tyus Jones. And Karna, my overreaction here is, how do the Grizzlies win basketball games right now? I mean, besides hoping that they win the shooting luck roulette battle that night, but they've won that battle. Not tonight, but at least again on Saturday against the Wizards.
And this is the scary part. Based off of what I've seen in the rotations, and this is my takeaway. Like my last takeaway is, this is probably the most concerning thing. Is I don't think the front office knows, or Taylor Jenkins' staff knows how to win basketball games, because I think they're still experimenting in live time. Like, I think they expected maybe a bigger jump for Zaire Williams. I think they expected bigger jumps from all of our guys all around, and I think they expected Marcus Smart and Derrick Rose to fit in chemistry wise better with the offense than they have. And I think there's a learning curve, right? Like, now we said it all the time. We make qualifiers after qualifier. We got excited in the preseason, but we always said, hey, it's the preseason.
Yeah.
And I think what we're encountering is, in live time, our veterans are the extremes, right? The veterans and the new guys are learning really, really fast and learning in like a really challenging environment, and they're not learning fast enough. And we are going to keep dropping games until either there's an adjustment from the coaching staff, or there's an adjustment from Marcus Smart, Derrick Rose, or the young guys take a step. Right now,
I don't know what that adjustment is, though.
I don't know either. But that's why I don't get paid by the Grizzlies to think about that.
Fair.
I don't like, if I knew what the adjustment was, I'd be Phil Jackson. But instead, I do food and beverage data. So I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's the most frustrating thing, right? Is like, I don't think they know either. I think that's why we continually see 3-pointers or like efficiency be a huge problem, bench scoring be a huge problem. They haven't found the right chemistry among a group of bench players or a group of starting five, or a mix of those, to really put an efficient team on the floor. And that is scary because luckily, and this is what we'll get to in just a second, we don't play a challenging schedule for the next 3 games. And this is what I'll say. The Pelicans are a good team. The Nuggets are obviously a good team. The Wizards, we ran into a buzzsaw that night. And the Mavs have Luka, and we had no one to even touch him tonight. All that's to say is this first 4 stretch of games, at worst, I thought we could go 1-3. At best, 2-2, or maybe 3-1, counting the Nuggets as almost a surefire loss.
Yeah.
We've got 0-4. Disastrous start to the season. Now it's time Taylor Jenkins to earn his paycheck. Patrick St. Andrews to earn a paycheck. Let's go. Let's figure it out. That's my only takeaway is you got to figure it out. I don't know what the move is. I'll let them figure it out. Hopefully they earn their salaries.
That's the thing. I mean, you're so right that it's not on us or any other Grizzlies fans, podcasters, etc., to come up with this offensive plan. The scary thing is, though, I don't know what if I was paid all the millions in the world, where would I even start? Because the limitations of this roster are so immense right now. We're not going to pick on specific bench guys because I think we've done that enough in this episode.
Yeah.
But as a collective unit, you have a bunch of people on the bench who probably shouldn't be playing in the NBA at this point. Of the people who came off the bench for the Grizzlies tonight, the only ones who I think are NBA players at this moment are John Conchar and David Roddy.
Yeah, I agree.
Either everybody else is either past that moment or haven't reached it yet and may never will.
I don't know if Derrick Rose is like washed completely, but I know you said not to pick on guys, but I'm going to because he was horrible tonight.
He was a minus 18 in 14 minutes. That's hard to do.
You have to try.
It's truly hard to do.
And one thing I will say in his defense, there was like 3 times where he passed to guys who were wide open, including David Roddy and Xavier Tillman.
Yeah.
And they just missed wide open 3-pointers. But in the end, that goes back to my royal decree. Why is Xavier Tillman taking more than 1 or 2 3-pointers a game? Right? Like, why am I seeing three possessions in one game for Xavier Tillman to shoot an open 3-pointer?
Yeah, they want him to be a shooter, and to this point, it's just not happening.
There's a disconnect between the analytical approach and the player personnel. I'm all for the analytical approach when it's maximizing the efficiency of the player personnel. But right now, the analytical side is leading the player personnel, but that we don't have that. That disconnect of we don't have a knockdown 3-point shooter right now. Luke Kennard is in concussion protocol. Like, I think so. I think when those 2 guys come back, that's when Taylor Jenkins will actually earn his paycheck. That's when I expect to see the big jumps, is when we get those 2 critical pieces back. And this is one piece of grace I'll give them, even though it is still kind of the front office's fault, but it's not Taylor Jenkins' fault. The management of the Steven Adams injury left a huge hole in this team. We saw it in the Nuggets series. Series, baseball. We saw it in the Nuggets game. We saw it in the Pelicans game. The lack of physicality down low is going to hurt this team all season, and it has nothing to do with the coaching staff or chemistry or whatever. It happens to be a problem with Steven Adams' knee.
And also, if you've been following the Grizzlies for a while, you know that this roster was in a much better place 2 years ago, and letting guys go like DeAnthony Melton and Kyle Anderson feels impactful in this moment.
Oh, absolutely.
And you couldn't have kept everybody. I'm not going back and second guessing every decision, but the fact remains that the Grizzlies were the deepest team in the league 2 years ago. And now, through a series of horrible injuries, dumb suspensions, which we talked about how it's an outrageously long suspension, even for as dumb as what Ja did. And now just too many rookies on your roster, too many young guys on your roster. You're left with a team that can barely roll a competent 7-man rotation out there, much less 9 or 10.
This is what I'm going to say. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm trying to figure out in real time after watching that game, if I was the Grizzlies coaching staff, what am I focusing on?
Yeah.
And I guess what I come back to is let's put Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. in as many positions to succeed as possible, and then just hope other guys make shots. And by that, I mean, let's get Jaren as many post touches as we can. Let's get Desmond Bane as many open 3-pointers as we can. And they're not going to score 30 every night because these guys are all-star level players. They're not MVP level players.
Yeah.
But on most nights, if you can get 20-point performances from both of them and just hope that your defense shows up like it did not tonight, you're going to give yourself position to win. So offensively, it's going to have to be Jaren post touches, Desmond threes. The thing that the Grizzlies, I think, can improve on that they're not doing right now is they need to be an elite defensive team. They were 11th in defensive rating coming into this game. They're probably going to plummet after what Luka did to them. They're just not showing this level of fight that we've seen on that side. And they do have the personnel to be a good defensive team. So that's where you're going to have to improve from a winning standpoint. Your offense is severely limited, but you can start locking people up.
But and this is my point, is like that's kind of my buzzsaw point. We've seen guys get like really, really hot and just and Luka's just going to do that night in, night out. Role players on the Wizards are not going to do that night in and night out.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like, conceivably, if everything goes right, we're 1-3, right? Or sorry, if anything goes right, we're 1-3. Everything went wrong. We were still competitive with good teams, and so I think a lot of people, not a lot of people, some Grizzlies people on Grizzlies Twitter are saying, "Hit the panic button, let's tank." Crazy stuff, just crazy stuff, right?
You can't say that 4 games into a season.
You really
without
can't say
your
that
best
4
player.
games into the season without 3 of your best players, really, if we're being honest. We are severely limited offensively. Honestly, we're severely limited defensively if Jake LaRavia is getting minutes. And some of our younger guys are getting minutes. Like that, it is affecting both sides of the ball, especially on the perimeter. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough sledding. The lucky part, and we'll get into this in the Royal Court, is we have a 3-game stretch against teams that are actively trying to lose, which seems to be our kryptonite. But these 3 teams are actively trying to lose. King, let's get the Royal Court started, because I want to know what you need to see in these next 3 games.
Let's head to the hard court. That means we are on the Royal Court, where it is time for heated debate. And honestly, Karna and I have had enough of heated debate. We can't do this. Okay.
Play better. We're not those.
So instead, we're just going to talk about our keys and predictions for these next 3 games. And as Karna set it up, these are 3 more winnable games. First, on the road at the Jazz. That's kind of a house of horrors for the Grizzlies, but okay. And then 2 games in a row on the road in Portland, Friday night and Sunday night. So that's a Wednesday game, Friday game, Sunday game. The Grizzlies still have not had more than 1 day in between games all season. Hefty schedule here in the opening. Karna, we'll get to our predictions at the very end of the episode, but what are your keys to these next 3 games? Because we don't know for sure if Santi Aldama and Luke Kennard are coming back, particularly in Luke Kennard's case, since he was at shoot-around today, active. It seems like he's probably going to come back at some point during this road trip. Santi, we don't know with his ankle sprain, but you might get Bismack Biyombo starting on Friday. He could potentially join you for that Friday game in Portland. So with those roster thoughts in mind, what are the keys to these games for the Grizz?
This is the first key, and I'm sorry to take it because it's such low-hanging fruit. Jaren and Dez need to have 20-plus points in each game, right? These are not teams that are particularly great defensively, historically. Or rather, I don't know, it's a small sample size for this season. I'm saying they don't have the personnel to be solid defensive teams.
Well, that's a very fair take. The Jazz are
Yeah.
the worst defense right now,
Yeah.
according to defensive rating. Portland is the 10th worst defense, according to defensive rating.
Yeah, and granted, Portland has had a couple of good teams roll through, the Clippers being one and the 76ers being the other. So, I mean, look, all that's to say is these teams are actively trying to lose. Jaren and Dez need to play to an all-star level.
Which they did.
Which they did tonight. Ideal against a middle of the pack to good team, right? These teams are actively trying to lose 20 to 25 for each of them at the minimum is what I expect. And that's all flowing into a larger theme that I need to see, and I'm going to leave it to you after this, is consistency. Consistency, consistency, consistency. That means whether it's play to play, whether it's quarter to quarter, or it's game to game, there needs to be the development of a consistent identity and a consistent way to score the ball. You outlined two great ways to do that. Jaren post touches and Dez 3-pointers. I don't care what it is. It could be Derrick Rose spot up 3-pointers if that works. There needs to be don't do that. I'm just kidding. There needs to be a consistent amount of scoring. There can't be I mean, yeah, if you want to go down a 26-0 run, great. I love it. Get hot. Bang out 3-pointers. But what we can't have is guys go super cold at the end, inefficient shot selection like we saw at the end of the Mavs game. We need consistent shot selection, a consistent offensive philosophy, and whether that's Jaren post touches, Desmond Bane 3-pointers, that all should result in very, very efficient, solid games for the two of them. I think that would be enough to win those 3 games, is that consistent approach. The Mavs are a better team than both of those. The Mavs are better than the Trailblazers and the Jazz. So this consistent approach should win those 3 games. I don't care if it's ugly. We need something in the W column for our young guys and for our veterans before the locker room gets a little messy.
Wow, that's a scary thought there at the end, because Marcus Smart was hot at the end of this game at the officials and probably just at the general way this season is going. But one thing to track is you do have a very loud voice in the locker room now, who is not used to losing like this. It'll be interesting to see. I think Marcus Smart's experience and his fiery personality are actually going to help the Grizzlies climb out of this. But there is the possibility that it leads to tension and chemistry issues, and that's the worst case scenario. I agree with everything you said, and Desmond and Jaren should have good performances against 2 of the NBA's 10 worst defenses. I'm not going to really focus too much on the offense here, because I think the offense's problems are structural and they're not getting fixed until, and this is maybe an if, maybe this never happens, but until you have John Morant, Luke Kennard, and Santi Aldama all available, all of whom can help you offensively tremendously, both in their ability to hit shots, but also create shots, all 3 of them. So we'll push the offense off until we see any semblance of health. Defensively, though, the Grizzlies can make improvements right now. Credit to them, they had a horrible defensive rebounding performance in the first game against the Pelicans, and they've been better since then. They're actually 7th in the NBA in defensive rebound percentage. They are trying to play with pace. They're 8th in pace. They just haven't been very effective at scoring in the fast break. They're 21st in fast break scoring. So they're trying to get out and run. They're just not doing it effectively. But that's going to come. As Marcus Smart gets more used to playing with this young team that is not built to score in the half court, he is going to be able to, as the point guard, help push the pace. We know that he's already getting quite a few steals. So for me, it's the Grizzlies defense and having a certain level of institutional pride on that end to where you say, yeah, we're not a great offensive team, but we are going to win these 3 basketball games because we're going to be the tougher team on the floor, and we are going to lock up 2 misfit rosters who have a lot of talented offensive players, but similar to the Grizzlies, no offensive identity. In that type of game, the team who plays harder should win. So with that in mind, what are your predictions for these next 3 games?
Look, we've been doom and gloom. One thing that I just want to go back real quick. Let's start pushing the pace. I think that would help. We're a young team. Let's push the pace. Let's see how that works. We sometimes we're like trying to pick and roll in the half court. It hasn't really been that efficient for us. So it's hard when you lose someone like Steven Adams. Let's push the pace. See what that does. My predictions. We've been doom and gloom. My prediction is this. 3-0. Get right. 3-0 is my prediction. I'm so wrong, but 3-0. The only conceivable thing I can see happening is like Lauri Markkanen just cooks us for the Utah Jazz, and we lose that game. But the Portland Trailblazers are actively trying to lose. They have 1 win, which I guess is more than us, but
infinitely more.
Yeah, we should win all 3 games. I'll leave it at that.
I want to say the same. I will go with a 2-1 road trip. And the reason being is the Grizzlies were a good team last year and they still couldn't win on the road. So it's hard for me to envision them doing it 3 straight times. And as we said about the Wizards, this is not the time of year you want to play bad teams because they are still engaged at this point in the season. It's not after the trade deadline where you have quasi G League rosters trotting out there. Because teams have just sold all their non-foundational pieces. I don't think the Grizzlies are going to get there as a team to where they're going to be selling their non-foundational pieces. Who are those people anyway? I mean, does anybody want some David Roddy and Jake LaRavie? I don't think so. But the Grizzlies are going to steadily bounce back. I still predict that they are going to have double-digit wins by the time Ja Morant is back.
Wow.
And if they were 10-15 when Ja Morant's coming back, that is not a terrible place to be.
No, it's not.
But if the Grizzlies have a losing record on this road trip, it is going to be fully panic mode. And what does panic mode even mean for what the front office can do? I don't know, but it means you are actively seeking out a potential trade to fill the Steven Adams void. And on the other side, like if panic mode gets to a certain point, that is when you start thinking about tanking. That's not going to happen based on this road trip. That's not going to happen anytime before Ja Morant gets back. Unless his team is like 5-20 when Ja gets back, he's going to have a chance to push them back towards at least the bottom end of the Western Conference playoff bracket. But yeah, I think it starts with a 2-1 road trip here. And most of all, it starts with being the excellent defensive team that we know the Grizzlies can be. Yeah. Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., Marcus Smart, Xavier Tillman, Zaire Williams should be an elite defensive lineup. We need to see that. And then can the bench just come in and give you something, at least with their effort on the defensive end? And if they do that, I think they should be able to pull out at least a couple wins.
This is one thing I'll say, too. Grizzlies fans are annoyed and they're mad, and I get that because I am, too. This is not our championship year anyway. I'll just leave it at that. Ja Morant on the floor against the gauntlet that the West is. Our championship window is opening. It is not this year. Do you disagree?
I don't disagree based on what we've seen. It's just, here's the optimistic look at this. The optimistic look is the Grizzlies are going to be able to middle this Western contender logjam to where we know that the Warriors, Suns, Lakers are all on the way down in terms of their age, in terms of how long they have people on the roster for. Like those teams are certainly not going up from this point. Like maybe at least in the Suns' case, they've got 2 or 3 good years in them, but it's not going to be a 5 to 10 year run.
And we have a solid young core and some good assets, and that means our championship window isn't this year, right? So I wouldn't get all panicked and say, "Oh, the Grizzlies aren't going to win a championship." It doesn't really change the future of the Grizzlies. We haven't gotten to a mode where we need to sell off a bunch of assets and blow the thing up, right? We are still relying on our young core. We still have great pieces going into next season. I'm not saying this season's over. I'm saying The championship window for us isn't like the Suns or the Lakers or maybe even the Nuggets, where the time frame is compressed. We have a longer runway to go, so don't lose faith and think, well, I'm going to stop coming to Grizzlies games or stop watching the Grizzlies or stop listening to Hoops Royalty. The runway
Please don't
is
do
still
that.
the runway is still long. And that's why I'm not panicked, right? I think baseball and being a fan of baseball has taught me to think more long term. And I think the Grizzlies have a solid long term outlook. And I wouldn't hit the panic button organizationally yet. I might hit the panic button on the season, but I wouldn't hit the panic button organizationally yet.
So what I said when I'm saying they could middle it is you've got this older class of contenders who will, in the next 3 years, be on the downturn. On the other side, though, you do have teams like the Thunder, like the Pelicans, who are very much on the rise. Who knows what the Jazz will look like with all their assets, even the Blazers. The NBA changes quickly. And sometimes teams who are constantly thinking, okay, next year is when we are finally going to be in our championship window, sometimes those teams never reach it. And for the Grizzlies to not fall into that trap, they're going to have to treat this year as a championship window season. And that means not giving up on the season unless it's a complete and total disaster. Because just look at the Lakers last year. They started 2-10. They ended up in the Western Conference Finals. We know how they got there. And they made dramatic moves that I can't possibly envision the Grizzlies front office making, but they made dramatic moves with no assets. They were completely toast. And they made lemonade out of lemons. Honestly, there's probably more aggressive metaphors for what they did, because they took a team that was nowhere close to contention, brought them to the NBA's Final Four, because they said, you know what, there's no reason for us to try to get another draft pick. In the Grizzlies' case, unless it's like a top 5 draft pick, you don't need another project, another role player on this team. The bones are there, so you might as well stay committed, because this championship window may not be as long as you want to think it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's completely fair. I what I would argue, though, is that the Lakers were forced to kind of think like that because of their age, right?
Yeah.
You have a generational talent in LeBron, and you have an aging AD. Doesn't matter actually what his age is. His injury history dictates that he's a guy that doesn't have a whole lot of time left, right? Same thing kind of with the collection that was in Phoenix, right? So my argument, though, is that's a good example, I think, of a really effective way to push your chips in the middle and say, we want to win now. I just don't think the Grizzlies are at that point yet where this is just the honest part of it, too. Right now, we don't have a generational talent insofar as a guy that's going to, like a Jokic, that's going to get a triple-double right now. Like a guy that doesn't have any weaknesses in the game and can score on his own effectively, efficiently. Like, and when I say generational in that, I'm talking about the caliber of like LeBron, Giannis, even Joel Embiid sometimes when he wants to play basketball. Those guys, that class of player, John Morant is like one slight step down from that, but we have a collection of guys around him that can push us to a championship caliber team. Right now, we are not that team. I think we need a deeper roster. We need some of our young guys to hit. They haven't right now. I don't know if right now is the time to push the chips in, but this is my caution. If I'm talking to the front office, this is my caution. If you're going to invest in assets, no injury, like clean to cleaner injury histories.
Please.
Guys who can score on their own, guys or guys who can create for others. There needs to be an assessment of how the guy fits into the team, especially if you're going to add midseason. Because then you are in win now mode, right? If you add in the season, you're then in win now mode because you've given up significant draft capital or you've given up on some young guys. No one's going to take LaRavia anymore. No one is. Like, no one's going to take LaRavia for anything meaningful. right? So you're going to have to give up either a project that's decently close or a bunch of draft capital. Make sure that guy fits in. If you want your championship window to be compressed and you're putting all your chips in, make sure they're on the right player that fits in, that's able to score, that's able to pass, that's able to do a whole lot of different things, and really able to fit in a lot of different situations. If we go back and get Manu Ginobili, that'd be pretty sick. Just like a playmaker, man. I don't know. It's just like a playmaker off the bench would be nice. But yeah, that's my. If we're gonna do that strategy, I'm okay. Let's make sure we find the right person.
What the Grizzlies have going for them is they've gotten the hardest part. They have 3 star-level players on their roster right now. And if even reasonable projections for these 3 guys hit, they're a good enough trio to win an NBA title. What I am saying is whenever you have that trio together, it makes sense to treat it like this is a year we could go all the way. And I don't really know what you're going to do in terms of like tanking that's going to substantially raise your odds of winning a future championship at this point. So it's really a question of you're going to have insane health luck this year, because with 2 of your key rotation players already out for the season, unless something miraculous happens with Brandon Clark, then the rest of your roster has to stay healthy for you to have a chance. Right now, the Grizzlies are on the opposite end of the health spectrum, where they've already lost 2 guys for 3/4 of the season, of their 4-game season thus far. Hopefully, those guys in Kennard and Aldama will be back on Wednesday. But Karna, we went longer than we thought getting into championship window talk late on this Monday evening. Any last thoughts for the folks?
Keep watching, keep listening. The Grizzlies aren't going anywhere. We're a good team that has fallen on some injury issues and some suspension issues. And one thing I would like you to, I hope is happening right now, is I hope Ja Morant is seeing this and understanding how important he is to that team. Because I think we lost the plot a little bit, right? We said, oh, well, like, look at Desmond, look at Jaren, like these guys.
Yeah.
This team is not going anywhere without Ja. I hope he understands his responsibilities now. I hope he understands what he means to the city now, what he means to the team. That would be that would be worth losing the first 4 games of the season. If he comes back and learns from this, and this puts the nail in the coffin for his antics. Call him that, I guess. I don't know.
We're going to end it right there because that was fantastic. A lovely thought for the people of Hoops Royalty. I'm King Jimison alongside Karna Venkatraj. This has been Hoops Royalty, bringing you Royal Hoops takes about the Memphis Grizzlies and NBA. Please don't forget about our giveaway out on the socials, or really wherever you listen to this podcast. If you subscribe on YouTube or give a 5-star review and nice comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify before Wednesday. Again, that's subscribe on YouTube, 5-star review, nice comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify by Wednesday. You will be entered into a drawing to win a Ja Morant autographed shirt. He signed it for me himself back in October 2021, right before his 3rd-year leap. So clearly I had something to do with that. And I will be gladly sending it to one lucky listener who helps grow this show. So please go out and do that before Wednesday, and we'll be back right here next Monday. Hopefully talking about a team that has at least one W to its name. This has been Hoops Royalty. Have a great night, and thank you for listening.